Are slow golf claps allowed for television series? Because if so, hello everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The penultimate episode of Dexter Original Sin is here. It is called Blood Drive, which plays a big part of this episode, and gets sort of people into place and gets people at the precinct all at once. Um, this is a phenomenal episode. I can't express enough how surprised and shocked I am by how good this series is. It's much better than it has any right to be, especially after New Blood and that the last few seasons of Dexter weren't up to most people's part. Although I like most of New Blood, I think the ending, while better than the ending of the original series, still left a little bit to be desired. This is just great storytelling that's happening, and some pieces that like they drop in here to tell a story that connects to the first season, uh and they drop little eggs here and there through this season where you think it might lead to something else, but it's just to kind of get to this point of the episode. We start this episode with a Brian Moser sighting, an adult Brian Moser sighting, and there's an end game to it. You're like, why are we just starting off with Brian Moser? Why is he hanging out with old women at a bingo parlor? This seems odd. It's what he does in his spare time, but there's an end game to it, and boy, does it pay off gruesomely. After we look at Brian for a bit, we catch up with Harry and LaGuerta, and they show up at the hospital as Bobby was just shot. And so they show up to the hospital, try to get a read on how Bobby is doing, and in that, they get their information. It's like he's in a bad way. He's going to be in the ICU for quite some time. LaGuerta then says, "Hey Harry, can I talk to you for a moment?" She pulls him off to the side. It's kind of like, look, if we're going to be partners, if we're going to do this, you can't lie to me. You got to be on the by and by. Everything's got to be on the up and up. Tell me what's going on. And Harry's like, well, what are you talking about? And she tells him, like, I looked into your folder and saw that you pulled out the file about Brian Moser. Who is that? Why is he so important? Why did you pull that away from him? There's one thing that I need to mention here that just annoyed me. Just the one thing that bugged me in this whole show. We just saw a shot of Brian and knew that that was Brian Moser. And then in this shot, she mentions Brian Moser and they do a flash cut back to that Brian Moser as if your audience is not smart enough to realize that that's who she was talking about. Like, I respect your audience. You don't need to go ahead and put everything in front of them. Like, stop. That's the only thing that sort of was like, why would you do that so quick? But Harry then gives her the details of what happened in that gruesome Laura Moser case. Tells him about Laura, tells him about how she was a CI, how he had an affair. Like, he's letting all of it, almost all of it, out of the bag and sort of giving it to her in full display. He says it's his fault that the thing went the way that it did, and he's sort of at fault for Brian's becoming who he is. He said he's always wondered what happened to little Brian, but he never really had a chance to follow up. But he assures her that the person that is doing all these killings is not Brian. Like, he would not do this. Bull, he knows that's bull, but he feeds that to her to sort of get her off the case. Now, it's interesting to me because I immediately thought, like, oh, he gave her all the information but omitted Dexter, which is something that she could easily go look up. But remember earlier in the last episode, he had a very good detailed conversation with Camilla and Records is like, hey, I just want to verify that if somebody comes looking at that Moser file, Dexter's name is completely ripped from it. So he is giving that information, knowing that she's a good enough detective to go look it up and knowing that he's in the clear to save it. All the other stuff is there. Dexter's name is not there. So go with it. Go with you can. And she does. In the past, Harry goes to Aaron to tell him that, hey, we need to go do a search for Laura. She's been kidnapped and her and the boys are gone. And Aaron's like, well, how would you know that? And Harry's like, well, I effed up. I think I got her into trouble. I had an affair with her, and I think there's a chance that we may have been seen. And if we were seen by Estrada's men, she is in a bad way. And Aaron's like, oh, Jesus. The first thing that he says to her is like, does Doris know? Which is just amazing to me that in this time, he was the moral police, if you will, when he has zero morals in present day. But he's the moral police. He's like, there's Norris, no. And like Harry's like, what the hell does that have to do with anything right now? She's in trouble. Can we do a team to go find him? I need to create a search team to go find them. And Aaron's like, okay, cool. We will send everybody we can to go do a search team. However, you're not going to be leading that search team. You're going to go in there like a plainclothes officer because you've done enough damage here already. Give me your badge. I'm stripping you down until we figure out what this mess is. And so they go out to the shipping yard and do like a full court press. Like it looks like every officer that's on the payroll is out there looking. They're putting stethoscopes to the walls of each shipping container just to hear if there's any sound or if there's any movement to see if there's anybody that could still be alive. It's funny that they're doing it this way because they're assuming that at least someone would be alive enough to give some type of movement. But by and by, everybody would have been dead anyway. So even if there's probably more bodies in there that just don't give off any type of sound, and this was a pretty good, smart way for Straw to just dispose of a lot of people. He just chose to leave the kids alive because of Laura's request and knowing that more than likely they were going to die in there anyway. Back in present days, Aaron is giving updates to his estranged wife, Becca. When a lot of the other officers of the precinct are looking on, it's kind of feeling bad for both of them, except for Dexter. Dexter's like, I call BS. He's feeling bad for Becca, but not so much for Aaron. It's in this that there's an important overlay where Dex says there's a thin line between pain and pleasure, and Aaron is sort of walking this tightrope between both. He is in pain because of what's happening to his son, but he sort of is getting pleasure out of it and seeing how it is affecting Becca. Like he's enjoying this, but also sort of sad about it as well. We see later that eventually he has a conversation with Nikki, who does remember and does know that that's his dad, and kind of like, look, you were a good kid. This has nothing to do with you. This is bigger than you, kid. Which is a wild thing to say to your son while you're keeping him captive and cutting off his fingers. Like, what the hell is happening there that you think this is the best and most logical solution to what I said in the previous episode? He's doing this just to get back at Becca, which is wild. Dex says that this is his first time with a child killer, and so he really actively wants Aaron on his table. So Dex starts going into intel mode, like he has to go do a search, or he goes to Aaron's apartment to go look for some information about Aaron, and he's doing his snooping. He's looking around. He says that the apartment is more like a divorcee's home than it is a single pad, like a recently divorced person, even though it feels like we know that he has been divorced or separated for at least 5 years. The apartment shouldn't look like the way that it does. So it's clear that he is not in the right state of mind. He's a little bit disheveled, and this has gone and affected him more than he puts on. Dex sees the charcuterie board of that he's sort of been giving kids. That doesn't click to anything that Dexter would know. There's no knowledge of that, so he doesn't have anything that doesn't trigger anything for him. But he does eventually find some photos. He finds some photos of Nikki and Aaron at an arcade, which is the arcade that he talked to Dexter about earlier in the season when he was like, hey, I got my high score on this one arcade that my dad always takes me to. That's the arcade that's in the photo. So that's sort of triggers for Dex, like, okay, cool. I got a point of reference that I can sort of go to. And he makes that sort of the spot where he's going to do his kill room. He starts putting those photos away to keep, and he hears someone entering into the home, into the apartment. And it is Aaron, followed by his father, Harry. And so both of them are coming in, and Dex is like, oh, Jesus Christ, my dad always being the good guy and helping people at the wrong people. But Dex has to get up out of there. So he finds a way to exit out of the patio, like first floor. He jumps off and he scurries out without getting caught. The next morning, Dex wakes up and asks Harry about Bobby, see how he's doing. He's like, yeah, he's in a bad way. It's going to take a while. And then he asks about serial killer, to which Harry lies. Harry's like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's a serial killer at all. They don't look like to seem like they're being attached. And Dex immediately clocked like, this is the first time that I can actively tell that Harry lied to me. Interesting. Because he actively also omits that Brian is back in the picture, or even who Brian is. It's clear, I have a little more knowledge, but it's clear that Dex did not recall Brian. He was young enough in that moment that Brian didn't click to him, or Brian is old enough to know that he had a younger brother. Dex is not old enough to realize that he still had an older brother. And so for as far as he knows, there is no Brian. This scene does have a serious laugh out loud moment for me. Deb comes out and apologizes to Harry, and Harry's like, "Look, I don't care." She's like, Me and Gio are over." He's like, "I don't care about all that. I'm glad that you're safe, but I am ordering you to never date an older man again." Which, as the seasons go along in that original series of Dexter, we know that Deb gonna do whatever the hell she want to do. So even Dex in that moment's like, well, knowing what I know now, because he's doing the overlay, knowing what I know now, Deb has at least always been honest about herself. She never really says, "Cool, Dad, I won't." She's like, "Yeah, well, the heart wants what the heart wants." Harry then tells her about her godfather, Bobby, and how he's in a bad way. She's like, "I just got to do something. What can I do?" Dex mentions the blood drive that's happening at the precinct. And Harry's like, "That's a great idea. You should take your sister to the blood drive." So he does so. Back in the past, with the shipping container search, they go in 3 days of that search. And it's a massive shipping yard. So it takes them a very long time to go through all of these. And then one plainclothes officer, she hears something in there. She's like, "I think I got one." They open up the container and just blood just starts, like a horror movie, just starts pouring out of the shipping containers. And Harry's like, "Well, he killed everyone." And then you hear a faint help from the far corner of the shipping container. And it's Brian sitting there with Dex on top of him, like in his lap. And Harry just goes over and grabs Dex and just leaving Brian there. They're like, "Cool." And Brian's kind of like, "Well, hold on. Can I pick me up too?" He just picks up Dex and starts rubbing his back. And then Bobby goes to go get Brian. And as Brian is leaving the container, we look back through his eyes and see a shot of Laura completely dismembered. Like her head is separated from her arms, separated from her torso. Like he is trying to cut her the hell up in front of her kids. And so that can seriously mess up anyone. And so no matter how sweet Dexter is in this moment, that's going to have an effect on him differently than Brian is. Brian was already having some like out of pocket energy about him. Dex was a sweet kid, and this sort of made him that. It would be interesting to see, someone brought up in the comments, to see who their father is, because it's clear, or if they have the same father. I don't even remember if they have the same biological father. That part escapes me from the original series. But whatever the case is, there's more tendencies of violence already implanted in Brian than there was in Dex until this moment. Dex takes Deb to the precinct and drops her off at the blood drive line, which is a long ass line. He leaves her there. He goes to go work on some of the materials that were at the crime scene where Bobby got shot. And then Tanya comes in and is like, "Well, nope, before you do that, I'm going to need you to go do me a favor. You're a med student. I need you to speed up this line. Go start drawing blood." While that's happening, LaGuardia goes down to records with Camilla and does exactly what both Harry and Camilla thought she was going to go do. And she goes down there to ask for the records of Laura and Brian Moser. She looks it up and it just says clear as day, no mention of Dexter. Laura Moser, deceased, one son, Brian Moser, 7. She's like, "Well, that's all I need to see." She closes it up and says, "All right, cool, thanks, I'm good." So she just needed to know that I can trust my partner now. He's no longer lying to me. He's on the up and up. He had a brief moment that he needed to take care of because of the affair. Bygones be bygones, cool. She gives him a little nod when she sees him again, like, "All right, you're back in the good favor with me." Camilla immediately calls Harry and is like, "Hey, she took it hook, line, and sinker, just like you said she was going to come down and research it. We're all in the clear. I think we got her off the scent." He's like, "All right, good. What about the information that I asked you to go find for Brian?" She's like, "Brian's a ghost. I can't find him at all. I can't find any records of his medical stuff because it's sealed. He was a minor, but I can't even find any addresses for him. Like, he does not exist on any type of sort of mode or map." Back in the flashback, the social worker who was assigned the case of Brian and Dex, Barb, is talking to Doris and Harry about adopting the kids. You're saying the state doesn't want us. They're frowned upon splitting children. They, like, if you're going to take them, they want you to take them as a sibling set. So Doris asks, like, where did these kids come from? Like, who were their parents? And Harry goes into, like, they were an informant's kids. The informant is now dead. And Doris is not stupid. She puts 2 and 2 together and quickly assesses that these belong to the person that Harry was having an affair with, and Laura Moser. So she then goes over to the kids and just sort of has a quick meet with them and a connection. And she immediately becomes the motherly figure to both of them. Was like, look, these kids need a mother. So we'll take them both. So it's interesting. I never knew this. This wasn't anything. There was a moment where she did take them both until Brian F's all of that up. We have another laugh out loud moment for the history of Dexter. Deb introduced herself to LaGuardia, and LaGuardia is like, I have no time for you, young person. Like, oh, cool, you're the other Morgan. I don't, stop talking to me. Where history goes with the two of them, that's a funny first time meet. We also see that Deb is sort of getting that fire lit for her in a purpose. Like she now has found a new purpose flame that has sort of occurred in here because she sees LaGuardia there in a dominated men world. And then Tanya comes in. She sees Tanya and is like, wait, you are my brother's boss? It's pretty badass to have a woman be his boss. And Tanya asks her, like, would you have any interest of ever being a police officer? She's like, no, I don't have any blue in my blood. That's the male Morgan's gene, not mine. To which Tanya was like, well, if you ever do, please don't hesitate to reach back out to me. You can come see me at any point in time. So this is the first time you sort of see at least the flicker of the thought of her being an officer. Because that's the one thing about this episode. It didn't seem like she had any attachment ever to want to be a police person. But because she was on this path of like as an athlete and whatnot, she never saw it. But now that she's gotten sort of a look at it and taste of it, she's like, kind of like, this might not be the worst. Now, we do see later that she gets a voicemail message when she goes home to sort of rehear, and she learns that her scholarship is not completely off the table because they at least watched the tape of her. Like, yeah, we're aware of what happened, but we watched the tape of you that you sent in, and yeah, we still want you to come in. So the scholarship is still on the table for her. Dex is doing his blood draw stuff, and he's lamenting on the fact that he has to do all these other people and get all this blood draw instead of actually putting Aaron on the table like he'd like to do. And then, lo and behold, Captain Spencer comes in and he puts Captain Spencer on his blood draw table. And this is something that Dexter used to do really well when you have the two villains like Dexter and whoever he's chasing sort of meet, but not in a kill mode yet. Like they haven't gotten there yet. And sometimes they know of each other. Sometimes they don't. Someone is like Dex is aware of Aaron, but Aaron's not aware of who Dex is. Sometimes they do. This is always just great television. So there's a sequence where Dex is trying to draw blood from Aaron, and he sort of admits that like Aaron's a damn fine actor because he gives him the information of where the jersey came from, and like Aaron lets on that he's so sad about it, and he's killing it with flying colors. And Dex's like, this guy's good. So then Dex asks like, what kind of animal harms a kid? And then Aaron kind of like, well, it's animals. Like the cartel are animals, and that's exactly who they are. So he's leading on and continuing on that it's the cartel. And Dex sort of like, I agree, they are animals. Basically talking to him like, you are the animal. I know you're the animal. And Aaron's like, oh, okay, cool. All of this is happening while Dex is putting on a little extra oomph into the insertion and removal of the needle, to the point where Aaron's like, don't quit. I hope you are much better at solving other cases in forensics as you are as putting this needle in me because you're hurting me. But Dex is doing that clearly on purpose. Tanya then calls Dex off of the blood draws, like, all right, come back in here and look at the forensics on this plastic bag. While he's doing that, Officer Sanders comes in and asks Dex, like, hey, you know about me. I'm supposed to give blood, but I just got word that one of my old partners may be HIV positive, and we're not going to get that information back for quite some time. So is it possible that you could step in my place and give blood draw on my behalf? Dex like, say less. I got you. We can do that. Now, it's funny to me because I now see that positing of the gay storyline for Sanders was literally just to get to a point where Dex has to give blood twice in one episode. So that's what happens here. He gives a blood draw and on behalf of Sanders. And then while he's getting up from that and about to leave, Masuka comes in and says, hey, you are the only one who haven't given a blood draw yet. Time to pay the piper. And Dex tries to get out of it, but eventually he's like, nope, you got to do it. So he gives another blood draw. So he, in that moment, has given 2 pints of blood in a very short amount of time, which is just not healthy, which makes you think as an audience member, oh, if he continues to do this kill room tonight, it is not going to go well. Back in the flashback, while at his new home, Brian starts showing some troubling behaviors immediately when he begins to harm and smother with a pillow a crying Deb. Deb's crying as a baby, and he tries to smother it. And it's like, I just needed to shut up. Like, it keeps crying. Doris is like, nah, kid, you got to get the hell up out of here. Like, I don't know. No, why would you do that? Get this kid out of my place. So then Harry comes back home and tries to have a chat with Brian, and it escalates. It gets far worse. He just shrugs it off like, no, I just needed the baby to be quiet. Like, why'd you do it? I don't know. I needed to be shut up. And he tells Harry that you're not my father. He punches a glass window. He slaps Harry with a bloody hand. Like, it's a mess. This kid's on one. So then back in present day, LaGuerta and Harry discuss the case, and LaGuerta comes up that 3 of the names that they found in Tampa popped, having addresses in their county. 2 of them went to prison, so she's going to do a little bit more groundwork and look those folks up. And Harry's like, great, keep doing that. He's like, I want to check on what's happening here, and yeah, we'll come together and see what we got. While he's looking around, he starts seeing the photos, and there's a person that shows up in each of these photos. Person who is looking at the crime scene with an orange hat, and he notices that, oh, it's Brian, literally in each of these photos. And I don't know what he's doing, but he's clearly done these, and now he is stalking Dex. And I don't know what he wants with Dex, but I need to put it into this immediately. So it took a minute. It wasn't until this sequence that I caught it, because I wasn't really paying that much attention to her face in the first one, but we picked back up at the bingo place that we started with at the beginning of the episode with Brian. He's with Barb. They didn't put it together that it was Barb. She has the same birthmark on her face as young Barb does when as a social worker. So he's now hanging out with his old social worker, Barb, at this bingo parlor, just trying to get in good with her. So I immediately was like, oh, she gonna die. She is dead. That's when it clicked. And so he wins a bingo game and then coerces her to be like, hey, we should go out to dinner. I'm gonna take you out to dinner to celebrate. She's like, yeah, I'm down. He gets her out to his red van, and she's like, well, I want to, and opens up the van. The van has no seats in the back. It's just like a laid out place. And she's like, no, I want to sit in the front. And she's like, well, cool. Everybody wants something. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to stay with my brother Dexter, but somebody didn't let me do that. And it immediately clicks to her like, Brian? And she's like, yep. And he just punches her in the face and knocks her out. So Dexter then goes to the arcade and makes it his kill room. He sets everything up. He's putting pictures all over the place. This is going to be his spot. We see the first moment of the ramifications of him feeling a little lightheaded from giving 2 pints of blood in the same time. He even mentions it in the voice overlay. He gets a chocolate bar to sort of try to calm that back down and put some a little more sugar back in his bloodstream. And then he's off to go make his move. His first piece of his move, though, was to put an envelope on the front of Captain Spencer's door that said, for his name, and it said, you gave me your kid's jersey to plant at this house. I need you to give me $5,000 cash, or else I'm going to let anybody know, something to that effect. And then he gives him an address of where to go, and it's the address to the arcade. So he's basically drawing him near. Aaron takes it hook, line, and sinker. He goes and grabs his gun, and then he goes and makes his way over to the arcade. While that's happening, Harry goes to Bobby's bedside and kind of just wants some solace, some answers, some help, because Bobby is usually the brains or the voice of reason for Harry. He sort of shoots things off of him, and right now he's telling him, like, look, Brian's around. Brian's here, and he's coming after Dexter, and I need to know what to do. I need to know if we bring him in, if we bring Brian in, he's going to make himself known to Dexter. And I think that's going to have a negative effect on Dexter and everything that we sort of have set up for Dexter. What should we do? In my mind, Bobby's in a comatose state, so he's not really responding, but he's holding on to Bobby's hand as he's sort of having this conversation. And then Bobby responds and literally is like whispers, save Dexter. At that point, Harry runs off like, hey, he's awake. But clearly in this moment, Bobby's like, your job should be to protect Dexter at all costs. So then we see in the flashbacks where Barb takes Brian away from Dex. Just the violence is too much. She takes him away. Dex briefly asks, like, where's Brian going? But that's all he has. But that separation occurs. So back in present day, Aaron shows up at the arcade. Was looking around, and Dex comes out of the shadows and tries to stab Aaron, but Aaron turns around just in time to sort of put a hand up and gets a needle through his hand. The hustle ensues, and then Dex eventually gets the better of him and stabs him through the neck and puts in the entire vial into his system. So he's out, knocked out, wakes up on his kill table. Funny part is he wakes up on his kill table and Dexter's over there trying to beat Nikki's score on the arcade and that he has all the high scores on. And then once he finishes that, Dex goes through a list of all the things that Aaron has done. And Aaron's completely trying to deny to the point where he eventually says, Becca did this. Like, I'm doing this for Becca. And it's at that point that Dexter realizes, like, oh, not everybody has to be born bad. Like, some people are made to be bad. And kind of how Dexter is. Like, Brian was always bad. Dex seems to have been made to be bad because of what he saw. But in this, he learns that, like, oh, you were a good person where something bad happened to you and you just became the worst of the worst. And so you're doing this to get back at Becca, to make her feel the pain that you feel. Jesus, dude, you're going to hurt your kid to use him as a pawn to do this? You are a wild boy. Aaron says, let me go and I'll tell you where Nikki is. And Dax is like, nah, that's not going to work. So then he cuts off one of his fingers just like he did to Nikki. It's like, now you tell me. And Aaron's still holding out like, nope, I'm not going to tell you. And if you don't let me out, he's going to die of starvation wherever he's at. So it looks like originally Dex is being sloppy and kind of like opens up a slit so that Aaron can easily get out, but it's all part of his plan. He wants Aaron to go free so that he can tail him in his truck. So cuts a slit, Aaron gets up, goes out, gets in his car, and Dex follows him. Before that, because that's the closing scene of the episode. Before that, Brian is a bad boy. Brian has Barb tied up to something. I can't quite make it out because it's pretty dark. But he has her tied up. And she comes to. Brian says, you promised me that you wouldn't separate Dexter and I. And you lied. We were separated. So now I'm going to separate you. And he just takes out a chainsaw and starts violently separating Barb. Wow. I'm floored. Okay. And yeah, that's the end of the episode. Dex is on the chase, on the follow up behind Aaron. It's a really good episode, a great way to sort of a penultimate that bleeds directly into the next episode. I do wonder if the disorientation or having 2 pints of blood is going to be the best thing for Dex to be chasing behind somebody in a vehicle. I don't know if that's going to lead to the way that we needed to do. But this is leading in perfectly to the first season of Dexter, with the Bay Harbor Butcher and ice cream truck killer, Brian and Dexter. Brian knowing of Dexter, Dexter not knowing of him, and sort of Harry's play in part in creating all of this. All of this sort of exists at the hands of Harry, which is, I think, the thing that they wanted to show us the most. We always sort of felt like Harry was enabling Dexter, but now we can see that Harry not only was enabling Dexter, he created all of this whole Laura situation and her being killed. Like, all of this is done on Harry's shoulders. And it's interesting that the Harry that we see through the Dexter original series is all through the eyes of Dexter. It's Dex sort of glorifying his dad. So he's seeing the best version of Harry. He's not seeing the true version of Harry, which is a very flawed and messed up man. And so everything is leading me to believe that this first season of Origin Sin is going to be the only season, because it seems like it's coming right up on the cusp of bleeding in right into the first season of Dex, which means that Harry's time on this world is not long. I don't know if they're going to do it in this next episode or do another season, but it is the story that exists is that Harry saw Dex killing someone and it just took him out. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the person that he saw him taking out was Captain Spencer, his friend, and he just couldn't take it. Oh, that would be chef's kiss. What did you guys think about this episode of Dexter Original Sin? Go to leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on X at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.